Welcome viewers, I'm Pia and you're watching the China Report on NewsX World, and here are the top headlines. Japan has warned its citizens in China to heighten safety as Taiwan-related tensions spike, citing rising anti-Japan sentiment. The embassy has urged avoiding crowds, staying alert, respecting local customs. Meanwhile, the US has withdrawn a missile system from Japan as the Beijing-Tokyo dispute deepens. China has issued a strong protest to Washington over a $330 million US sale of F-16 and C-130 spare parts to Taiwan, stating that the move violates the One China principle. Defense spokesperson Zhang Zhaogang has stated that Beijing is very dissatisfied, accusing the US of interfering in China's internal affairs. Chinese Premier Li Qiang has pushed for greater cooperation with Russia in energy, agriculture and investment, seeking more Russian food imports and easier access for Chinese firms. Moscow has stated that bilateral projects remain strong despite global tensions. China and Syria have pledged closer cooperation on peace, reconstruction and the Belt and Road Initiative as well. Both countries have reaffirmed the One China principle and counterterrorism efforts, with China supporting Syria's economic recovery. China and Vietnam will conduct a joint naval patrol in the Beibu Gulf on the 19th and 20th of November to boost maritime security, enhance communication and strengthen mutual trust between their naval forces, highlighting efforts to maintain regional stability. North Korea has slammed the US-South Korea fact sheet as confrontational, warning of countermeasures. Kim Jong-un has criticized Seoul's nuclear submarine plans and alleged US control over the region. Meanwhile, South Korea has stressed it has no hostile intent towards the North. US President Donald Trump has called on House Republicans to support releasing the Jeffrey Epstein files, reversing his previous opposition. The House is expected to vote on making the documents public, which could include records on Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell and others. Donald Trump has stated that he would approve legislation imposing sanctions on countries trading with Russia as long as he retains ultimate control. Lawmakers have backed the bill while the White House continues efforts to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. Well, viewers, those are the headlines and our top focus. Japan has now warned its citizens to step up safety precautions and to avoid crowded places amid a deepening dispute between Tokyo and Beijing. Chief Cabinet Secretary Minoru Kihara has stated that the latest advisory is a renewed call for safety measures as sentiments towards Japan reflected in Chinese media had deteriorated after recent diplomatic events affecting the neighboring ties. Listen in to what Kihara has stated.
今般の注意喚起ですが、最近の日中関係をめぐる現地での報道等の状況を踏まえて、在中国高官から改めて、在留邦人に対して十分な安全対策を呼びかけたもので。
Meanwhile, Japanese media has reported that a US missile system has been withdrawn from Japan. The Japanese Defense Ministry has confirmed that the Typhoon mid-range capability missile launcher system of the US Army deployed to the Iwakuni base in Yamaguchi Prefecture since September 2025 for the US-Japan Resolute Dragon 2025 joint exercise has now been removed. Meanwhile, film distributors in China have suspended the screening of at least 2 Japanese films in the country amid escalating tensions with Tokyo. These developments come as Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi had earlier told the parliament that a hypothetical Chinese attack on democratically ruled Taiwan could trigger a military response from Tokyo. These remarks have, of course, sparked quite a sharp response from Beijing, which has signaled that it expects Takaichi to retract them in some or the other fashion. With us on the broadcast is Dr. Asta Chadha. She is an Associate Professor of International Relations at Ritsumeikan University, joining us from Kyoto. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World. At the outset, I wanted to understand from you, we're of course receiving reports that the rhetoric has turned quite sharp, not just officially but also on social media platforms, whether it's within China or Japan. How are the people of Japan reacting at this point?
Yeah, hi Pia. Thanks for having me. Well, I mean, in Japan, the tensions do remain high. People are quite aware. I mean, you were mentioning earlier that Japan has, given out a safety advisory to its citizens in China, and likewise, I mean, the same has been done by China as well, because they are also discouraging their citizens from traveling to Japan. So we can see after a very long time of relatively sustained peaceful dialogue between Japan and China, despite their territorial or maritime disputes. This time, it seems like relationships have definitely worsened a bit. But more than worsening of this relationship, I mean, which seems like, I mean, rather than calling it a complete overhaul of the system, I would say it's a temporary pause in their otherwise very functional relationship. This seems like a very calculated move on both sides, in terms of advising their citizens, because between China and Japan, historically, people to people connections remain very, very important. And so do the aspects of soft power, including films or including the fact that tourism is big on both sides of the border. So, them asking their respective citizens not to travel or to travel very cautiously is once again reflecting the government's own perspective, which is that they expect the relationship probably to worsen a bit more.
Indeed, and we're also learning that the Japanese Defense Ministry has confirmed that the Typhoon missile launcher system of the US Army, which was deployed for the Resolute Dragon 2025 exercise, has now been removed. I wanted to understand from you, was this a routine removal that was supposed to happen considering that the exercise has concluded, or has this taken place in the aftermath, specifically in the aftermath of the tensions now spiking?
Well, I mean, to be fair here, when these missile systems were, in some way installed in Japan, it was one of the first of its kind, with a mid-range capability, something that Washington had deployed in Japan. And there were protests from Russia and China, I mean, about it. But US at that point had said that the deployment was only to test their rapid wartime transitions and nothing very, very, permanent. And Japanese Defense Ministry at that time too had called it temporary. So its withdrawal within a week, after the exercises had already ended in September, those defense systems, they did remain a bit longer than they were intended to. But, from what we hear, at least in Japan, even the residents in Yamaguchi Prefecture and Hiroshima were petitioning for its removal, because Japan, at the core still remains a very peaceful nation, and they do not really support any war-related, infrastructure being built or accelerated in their territory. So despite this 2-month delay in withdrawing something that was already meant to be temporary, I don't see this as necessarily, signaling anything. That being said, the timing of it is definitely very, very curious. The fact that, they were withdrawn at this time when Japan-China row is kind of out in the open, and it's becoming more severe in terms of Japan-China relationship. One could also read it as probably the US attempt to kind of to calm down this diplomatic tension spike that has happened in the recent weeks.
Absolutely, ma'am. Requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some further updates. We're now learning that China has launched a strong protest with the United States over its arms sales to Taiwan, urging Washington to stop arming Taipei. China's Defense Ministry spokesperson Zhao Jiagang has stated that China is very dissatisfied with the arms sale and that it firmly opposes the US action. This comes as the United States authorized the sale of spare parts for F-16 and C-130 aircrafts to Taiwan, which is valued at $330 million US dollars. It marks the first such transaction since US President Donald Trump assumed office in January. Now, China has maintained that the arms sale violate the One China principle and grossly interfere in internal affairs, undermining China's sovereignty and security interests. Still with us on the broadcast is Dr. Astha Chadha. Of course, we know it's not quite sat down well with Beijing, this particular deal that was inked between the United States and Taiwan, but now directly lodging a protest with Washington, D.C. What do you make of China's action, the sort of messaging that Beijing is trying to make?
Absolutely. I mean, there is an increased strategic tension if you look at the Taiwan Straits, and any U.S. Military sales or defense sales, specifically larger arms packages, they definitely do boost Taiwan's defense capabilities. And also at the same time, they risk provoking China into more aggressive postures. We're expecting military drills or some such strong protest. So, I mean, given overall, there is an allied signaling by the United States at this point that Taiwan is not entirely out of their security calculus. It's very much at the center of it. And at the same time, from China, I mean, this is pretty much expected, right? They keep reinforcing the red line on Taiwan every single time US or Japan makes a statement. So, this repeated framing of arms sales as a violation of sovereignty just basically shows how core Taiwan issue is to both United States and China.
Absolutely. And speaking about Taiwan as well, is it likely that the United States could walk back, considering China has been sharpening its rhetoric, or will it go ahead with this particular deal, considering the significance for Taiwan's security in the light of especially Chinese aircrafts and vessels crossing the median line and the frequency of that increasing as well?
Absolutely. See, I mean, there's a difference between China trying to, accelerate its aggressive posture in East China Sea and China resorting to an open military conflict. And while the former is quite visible, the latter is less likely, at least as of now. So, given that there is less possibility that US would completely roll back any of its Taiwan policies, in the short term, or looking at it as a measure to calm down relationships, I mean, that seems very, very unlikely. That being said, for US and Japan both, this situation that has unfolded in the recent weeks is definitely a stress test for their own security posturing, in terms of how far can they go in backing Taiwan or in countering China the way they see China as a risk, and what are the kind of risks they are willing to absorb. And specifically for Japan, it is way closer to home than it is for the United States. So while the US completely rolling it back is very, very unlikely, there is possibility that both sides might try and achieve some sort of an agreement through dialogue.
All right, ma'am. With that, I'd like to thank you for taking our time, of course, putting all of that into perspective for our viewers. On that note, we're shifting focus to more developments coming in. We're now learning that during a meeting with Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, Chinese Premier Li Qiang has called for enhanced cooperation between China and Russia, particularly in energy, agriculture and investment. Li has expressed China's desire to import more Russian agricultural and food products, while also urging Russia to ease conditions for Chinese businesses and invest and operate over there. Now, according to local reports, Li's comments reflect China's strategic push to strengthen ties with Russia, especially amid growing geopolitical tensions. Mishustin has meanwhile reaffirmed that bilateral cooperation, particularly in energy, has proven resilient despite external challenges. This meeting comes as Russia continues its war against Ukraine and China faces increasing pressure from the United States and its allies. With us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. He's a strategist focusing on the Chinese economy and policy. Thank you so much for taking our time and speaking to us on NewsX World as we track these very crucial developments. China and Russia, of course, are reaffirming their close strategic ties, but especially in the economic sphere, they're talking about investments, especially in agriculture and energy. We do know that Washington has been applying a lot of pressure in order to curb Russia's energy exports. In light of that, how do you view this particular meeting that has taken place, the reaffirming of these ties, and reaffirming not just to maintain but also to increase the trade?
Well, both the Chinese economy and the Russian economy have been tied at the hips, as it were, for many, many, many decades, long before the Ukraine war. Because the Russia's exports are mainly agricultural products, both foodstuffs as well as fertilizers. And China, of course, has been the world's largest buyer because the China's economy, if China's territory, in spite of its vastness, is very poorly endowed with water. And then there was too much water down south, too little water up north, and then most of the soil remained problematic. So China has been world's largest agricultural products importer, and Russia, of course, is one of the world's largest, and is the largest exporter of fertilizers. So I think that the two economies are intertwined, apart from, of course, a closer partnership on geopolitics. As far as energy is concerned, of course, China also is the world's largest customer, and especially on gas. And then because of the Russian energy export through pipelines that bypass some of the choke points over sea lanes of communication, including the choke points in Malacca Strait and problematic areas through the Red Sea and so on. So I think that on both counts, the two countries are intertwined, and China is continuing to buy more products from Russia, energy products as well as fertilizers. But on the other hand, China is seen to be aiding the war in Ukraine. And of course, China's reliance on fossil fuel has been decreasing because of the share of the electricity supply in China, over 50% are now accounted for by green energy, solar power, wind power, and hydroelectric power. So China is could be buying less Russian energy on fossil fuels, but that can be supplemented by more agricultural products. China would not cease buying Russian energy because that would be total recapitulation to the West coercion. Because as I said, China has been buying Russian energy for a long, long time. But I think that buying less could also send a signal that China is now accommodating part of the West demands. But of course, that can be compensated more by China buying more fertilizers and more foodstuffs from Russia.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, sir, requesting you to stay on with us as we're tracking some other very crucial developments. China now says that it is ready to steer its relationship with Syria back on track. Foreign Minister Wang Yi met Syria's interim Foreign Minister Assad Shaibani in Beijing. This is the very first visit by a senior Syrian official since the new interim government formed back in March. Wang Yi has stressed that the long-standing friendship between the two countries must be maintained and has reaffirmed China's respect for Syria's choices. He's also highlighted Syria's support for the One China principle and opposition to Taiwanese independence. Shaibani has confirmed Syria's commitment to China and condemned all forms of terrorism. China, meanwhile, has welcomed Syria's participation in the Belt and Road Initiative. Wang Yi has expressed interest in helping Syria's economic reconstruction and improving livelihoods. Both sides agreed to gradually resume exchanges and strengthen bilateral ties as the next year marks 70 years of bilateral relations. Still with us on the broadcast is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung. Crucial developments this time regarding the China-Syria equation. We do know that the regime changed last year when Bashar al-Assad was removed from power by al-Jolani, now known as President al-Shura. But the Syrian government as of late has been quite warm as far as ties with the United States is concerned. What is China's interest in Syria in particular, especially with now Syria being a party to the Belt and Road Initiative?
Well, for Syria has long been part of the Belt and Road Initiative, but there was a sea change in the governance of Syria, and that translates into a total recalibration of relationship between Syria and the West, and between Syria and China. Now, Syria, of course, has been dragged down by a war, by poverty. Over 90% of Syrian people live below the poverty line. And the whole Syria has been gone into rumbles because of years of wars and conflict. So there needs a huge injection of capital and infrastructure building capabilities, which China can supply. And of course, as you pointed out, and Syria is a very important position in the Belt and Road Initiative, and also plays a very important part in stabilizing the whole of the Middle East. Don't forget, Syria is next door to Iraq, and of course the whole Iraq, Afghanistan also have changing governments, and all these countries are war-torn and lacking in infrastructure, needing in rebuilding, and so China is likely to play a very important role to help rebuild the infrastructure, to help improve the livelihood of the people there, and thereby increasing China's footprint and facilitating the development of the Belt and Road Initiative, which links the Middle East to China's economy, and that will serve as a force to stabilize the entire Middle East region, and would be of.
All right, it seems we've lost that connection for a little bit, but of course, Mr. Leung was taking our viewers, all of you, through what exactly is occurring as far as China and Syria is concerned. Let's get that connection checked once again. Please do inform me if it gets fine. But of course, you can see the visuals of the meeting taking place over there between Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi and Syria's interim Foreign Minister Assad Shebani. This is, of course, the first visit by a senior Syrian official since the new interim government was formed back in March. Wang Yi has, of course, stressed on the long-standing friendship between the two countries. He's reaffirmed China's respect for Syria's choices as well. He's highlighted Syria's support for the One China principle, and Shebani, on the other hand, has confirmed Syria's commitment to China, condemning all forms of terrorism. Of course, Syria's economic reconstruction is one of the crucial themes that were discussed. Mr. Andrew K.P. Leung, it seems that his connection is back with us. You were, of course, making your point. Please go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yes, okay, well, I lost you. So anyway, what was your question? Can you repeat it?
I was just telling you to go ahead with your point because we lost your connection in between. It had frozen for a bit. I had to interject at that moment.
Yes? Hello?
Yes. So you can go ahead.
Yes? Well, what was the question? I couldn't hear it.
You were talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, China's interest in Syria, of course, especially in the aftermath of the regime change that had taken place.
Okay. Well, the other point I was trying to make is that the new Syrian government was led by original targeted terrorist group, the HTS.
Yes.
Which of course regarded as a terrorist organization by the West, including the United States and the world over. But now it's been legitimized as the leader of the new government. And this new leader, the HTS leader, is been received in Washington. So I think that there is, and of course the new Syrian government wants to grow its economy, wants to build its infrastructure, wants to legitimize its governance. And so for this, it needs China's help to rebuild the infrastructure and to help to stabilize the economy, providing more jobs for the people. And that, of course, translates into a recalibrated relationship with China, with the Belt and Road Initiative.
All right, so with that, I'd like to thank you for taking out time, of course, sharing your analysis with our viewers. On that note, we're tracking further news coming in. We're now learning that China's defense ministry has announced that Beijing and Vietnam will conduct a joint naval patrol in the waters of the Beibu Gulf from the 19th of November to the 20th. Officials say the coordinated patrol aims to enhance maritime security, strengthen communication, and deepen mutual trust between the two countries' naval forces. This latest operation, of course, takes place as efforts by Beijing and Hanoi continue in order to maintain stability in the region at large. On that note, viewers, it's a wrap on the China Report. We will continue to track all of these updates very, very closely. But in the meantime, we're tipping into a quick short break.